Hey folks, James Millard here with Olympic Peninsula Skagit Tactics, and today I'm going to tie a fun summer fly that we fish a lot, a Muddler Minnow. Kind of a blend between a Bill McMillan, Harry Lemire sort of inspired pattern that I've tied for a bunch of years now. It's a cool fly. It is fished with usually fished with a dry line, and so you'll see us this time of year have two rods rigged, one with a floating commando head and a floating commando tip, and then a longer leader with some sort of a skated fly. I like to use this Muddler Minnow here. You can use whatever you'd like, but we fish a dry line first through the run, and then we come back through it with something like a hobo spray, which I'll be tying a little later. But yeah, so sit back, relax, and chill out for a bit while I tie up this muddler. All right, folks, let's get started on this muddler. I'm using a Semperfli nano thread in 18-aught for this. It's a little slippery, so be careful with it, but it's very strong and it works great for muddler minnows, which of course we are tying right now. Wickets Steelhead Muddler. Came up with this pattern a bunch of years back now, kind of copying, some of the Bill McMillan muddlers or the Harry Lemire style caddis muddlers. We're using an Eric's bomber hook, HR 418 in a size 4. These hooks are meant to tie bombers, as the name kind of suggests. Bomber is a spun deer hair Atlantic salmon pattern, and these hooks work out really, really well for that. I tied in a tag of Mirage tinsel and opal, small, so I can tie a butt on this fly, and so I'm going to go ahead and put a little butt on the end of this, a tag as it's properly called. And mine's only 2 millimeters, probably 3 millimeters long. It's not a big tag. That's why I like to use this holographic tinsel. Or I guess this stuff is Mirage tinsel, but it's all in the same spirit of holographic. It really reflects the light well. So to tie this in, I'm going to run this up to the return eye on the hook. These hooks are cool. They got return eyes on them. For those of you that need to use the return eye for the style of fly you're tying, it's not going to be super critical for me. Back to the return eye, and we are going to tie in our rib, which is the same stuff, the same oval tinsel. If I could find the piece I trimmed, I would reuse it, but I don't. So I'm tying in some oval tinsel on my side of the hook, and that will serve as our rib when the time comes to rib this fly. You can see I'm not worried about the underbody too much because I'm going to dub over that. And so having a smooth underbody is not super important. If I were tying like a floss or a silk body, I would be using a light thread so it wouldn't show through, and then I would be using some different materials. So for this, we're just going to dub the body on and just twist it up, the nice little dubbing noodle on your thread. You don't need to get crazy with the, I was going to use my dubbing spinner for this, the OPST dubbing spinner, which is awesome for spinning loops, but this dubbing is buggy enough. I'm using Nature Spirit African Goat in fluorescent orange. This stuff is great. It imitates seal very well. It's kind of a seal fur substitute. I have a hard time distinguishing between seal and African goat, so that's how close to me it is. So I'm just winding my body up, building a taper. And right here before the return eye. Now I'm going to counter wrap my rib. Try to get 4 turns. 2, 3, and we're out on 4. Guess that was technically 4.5, but who's counting, right? And you can brush this out at this point if you want it any buggier. I don't want it any buggier than that. Next, I'm going to use some moose mane. I'm going to use these as kind of legs for the fly. I'm going to spin it around the shank of the hook. And it helps with propping the fly up in the water. It helps with the bugginess. It's just a great little technique I found for muddlers, for this kind of muddler anyway. You could, of course, fish these on a sink tip, but this muddler is meant to be fished on the surface for me. The way I tie them and the way I fish them on a dry line. So I would be using, say, the OPST 7 weight with a floating commando head and a floating commando tip, and then a leader and this fly. We'll go through the run first with that, and then come by later with a wet fly. So I'm going to measure this just a bit past the bend of the hook. Lay it in on top, 1, 2 loose wraps, and spin. And this stuff is weird. It doesn't spin as well as some other hairs. So you got to kind of manipulate it around with your hands and your thread tension. The tighter you make it, the more it's going to flare out. So I'm liking that. I can adjust it after I trim out these butts. Butts are, whoops, missed a piece here. The butts are trimmed up. This fly is almost done, believe it or not. I'm going to just twist this and rotate my vise around to see if I can see the underbody. So once you have that trimmed, I give it some good thread tension, and then I just cover those ends ever so much. You don't have to be perfect with covering those up because it actually helps prop the wing up. Next, I'm using a Herbert Minor whiting neck. These are pretty cool. They come in a bunch of different colors. I have them in all kinds of colors because I like to use them as soft tackles and as a wing on muddler minnows. So I've got 2 that I prepped ahead of time, that I measured ahead of time. So we know that they'll work out on this fly. I'm just pulling some of the fibers back and measuring. You don't want the wing too long. You don't want it too short. You want it Goldilocks out just right. So I am still not happy with that length. We're going here. That's the one. That's the length. And then I'll strip my feathers back. Some people don't strip their feathers back. They like to use it to tie it in to help it from rotating. But I found with these Herbert Minor capes from whiting, the stems are pretty soft, which helps set them quite nicely, especially in that area where we trimmed off the butts of the moose. It just kind of naturally grabs it. So we're tenting these wings. Same way you would on an intruder or a more classic fly like the orange heron by Sid Glasso. Nice tent to the wing. And I am satisfied with that, I think. Wrap forward a few wraps on the stems. Pull the stems back. A few wraps back on the stems, back to where they start. Pluck them out of there. And there's one last step, and that's the most intimidating part of a muddler minnow is the head. Doesn't have to be. Doesn't have to be. I orient my hook up a little bit when I start doing this. I've got a nice brown spinning deer hair here. It works out great. I've got patches upon patches of the brown. This fly is something I probably wouldn't fish in the early season. Would probably do a olive or something more natural. This is meant to imitate an October caddis, which we're not typically dealing with until fall. So I just thought that the October caddis would be a little bit easier to see on the video because of the color. So I'm stacking my deer hair, spinning deer hair, all stacked up. Somewhere to be, which is the hook. And I measure back about 2/3 of the way of the hook is how far I want the tips. 1, 2 wraps, and then start spinning this up. So you spin it around the hook. And I can put a generous amount of pressure, enough to move the hook and the vise with this thread. So it's pretty good stuff. You can actually cut the hair with this. You don't want to, so don't go overboard. But if you can see what I'm doing, I'm stroking it back as I tie through it. That is going to help me when I trim later. But it also helps flare it, which is kind of what we want, all right? And there we go. We're going to half hitch a few times and trim this up. And I'm lucky I have a rotary vise, so once this is ready to trim, I'll just rotate the vise back and forth to trim it up. If you don't have a rotary vise, whip finish at the head and then pull it out and trim it in your hand so you can rotate it. I find that's important. Be able to turn the fly around as you're trimming. So we're going to cut this thread out here and start our trim process. And so what I do is I just cut at the top, at the bottom, at an angle, right side, left side. So now I've almost got a formed head here. If I just start rotating my vise and trimming it at an angle, it would help if I had some glasses. This is a little hard to see up close, but as you can see, just kind of shape the head gradually. And it does not need to be perfect. You don't need to get pissed off like I used to if I had a shaggy head. This stuff works pretty well. These flies work pretty well one way or the other. As I'm trimming, I give the fly a little flick to get all the hairs off that I wasn't able to brush off, and here shortly we will have a completed muddler. And yeah, I like this, where it's at right here, just about. And there you have it, folks. Wickets Steelhead Muddler. Like I said, we'll fish this on a dry line, but you can also fish them on a sink tip. It has caught fish. I know a guy that swung a Chinook trying to catch steelhead with a Muddler Minnow on a sink tip, so it'll work. But a couple of notes. You see how my hackle tips come just past the bend of the hook. That's good. That's good proportion-wise. And if you can see on the head, there's shank left. So some people will riffle hitch these. Some people will tie a tuttle knot. It's nice to have a little bit of bare shank up towards the head. I tie these on a loop knot and let them swim. Give them some action when they swim, but that's just my personal preference. So yeah, this is a great pattern. It stays up on the surface pretty well, especially with the moose mane legs that you see here. And you know, I'll actually put mucilin on the head of this fly to keep it up in the surface and skating. So hope you guys enjoyed it. Have a good day.